Thank you so very much for facilitating this. Let me share my screen real quickly. I don't want to trouble you all with memories of COVID because we all lived that. I'll just, I have to say that I really regret not being there because it's people like Jamie who I'd really like to network with and talk, because we're working parallel paths here. And the whole last sentence of his presentation regarding persuading your administrator, we had the same problem initially when we had to persuade our anatomists for integrating actual anatomy VR resources in their teaching. And when we talked about, it's going to be a 1-minute story, when we pitched VR as the great, good new thing that is really coming and should actually be integrated in the curriculum, we brought forward engagement, and the sudden response was, I don't care about engagement. My students are future doctors. They're perfectly engaged. So we set out based on this and collaborating with people in 3 medical schools. We set out to explore how we would merge things, like VR and 3D printing, how we would use digital augmentation and tangible 3D anatomy objects, how we would create an immersive classroom that would be exactly that would be conducive to learning, not only leveraging engagement, but leveraging what was said exactly before, the paradigm building nature of VR, how you remember things, how you can accomplish things in VR and they stick. So, a little bit of context. This work was part of the ENTICE project, the EU Knowledge and Alliance. These are parts of the Erasmus strand of projects, some funding from the European Union to all academic institutions in Europe, competitive process. And we set out to streamline immersive content creation. We actually went the other way around. We don't want to test whether or not VR works. This is really interesting and necessary, but we want to see how to make it work one way or another. We wanted to put learning objectives in the design and implementation, increase the quality of content, and put creativity and innovation through an education-focused lens. In short, we wanted to create bespoke resources for educational episodes, not the other way around. It's a really tricky part because the innovation of the project, we aim to go from for the validation not of resources, but of a process, an approach for designing XR resources. We wanted to have tangible and intangible 3D prints and VR, that is, and AR, that is. Integration in immersive educational resource design. We wanted, again, to have learning objective-centered development. Start from the learning objectives and build bespoke content for these learning objectives. We wanted, in short, to prototype a streamlining methodology for education-centric immersive resources. Now, you probably heard of co-creation. This co-creation started from marketing when they didn't want just focus group to engage people. They wanted people to feel like they're building the product. And we thought that we don't want to pitch things. We want to actually provide to our audience, which is academics and learners, the power to actually create, design their content. Well, creation might come a little bit later. We don't have the tools yet. Both for investing them in the content, but also for making content that actually works. And that was a rigorous process. We determined design parameters through 5 co-creation workshops with an arduous process, 2 and 3 hours each, finalized with 2 follow-up meetings and verified in at least one more iteration. And this was as we were building prototypes and applications. We went not the super very high fidelity route, but we did start with 3D modeling of anonymized DICOM images, actual anatomy data of real people, digitally reproduced them in 3D printing, and then we've built a spoke exploratory environment, something that could be construed as an anatomy installation. We're saying installation and not classroom because on one hand, you're seeing in the screen the 3D prints that can form an installation in augmented reality with users using their phones to actually consume content there, see the anatomical information. And also another part in VR, providing a collaborative space for everyone to stand there, learn, do a virtual lecture there with their teacher. We also went one more step forward. We created an annotation of these resources, putting the foundation for possibly making them reusable and repurposable for different lessons, for different learning objectives. Now, we asked our students about that. We asked peer teaching students, more committed, in 3 medical institutions, Karolinska University, University of Cyprus, and our own Aristotle University of Thessaloniki. A very small group of experts and students. It was a cohort of some 10, 12 people, if I recall correctly, but we did not do any statistics. Our aim was purely to assess, to evaluate, not to assess, sorry, to evaluate their impressions on these resources, and if we succeeded to the aims that we've put together, what are our lessons. We did think aloud sessions, think aloud is wearing the headset and just recording what people are saying as they're experiencing the environment, and structured, not structured, semi-structured interview. The themes we touched upon was usability, technology acceptance, and perceived usefulness. Topics in usability comprised utilization. I mean, how do you use this? Does it make sense as it stands? Things of presence and cyber sickness. In technology acceptance, aspects of satisfaction, capabilities, and the effect of novelty. And in perceived usefulness, most straightforward aspects: learning, expectations, maintenance and effectiveness, and future possibility of use. Now, I'm going to give you a snapshot. I know that I'm between you and lunch, so I'm going to be lightning quick. We put forward the question of usability, and people seem to feel that things are okay if they're done right. I mean, there is the issue of VR sickness, but simple things, and you may gonna laugh, but doctors, actual medical doctors, said to us, okay, I think that it's best that I'm feeling better now that I'm using VR sitting down, because I can swivel my head with the chair and I don't have to balance myself. And also facilitation to familiarize themselves. They didn't want, our users did not want to be supported all across the experience. They wanted to be supported medically, but in the sense of teaching, but not technically. They just wanted to be told exactly how to use the device and then be left able to interact. Technology acceptance, immersion, and guidance was contrasted with the support against the uncanny. I must say that most of our cohorts were not experienced VR enthusiasts. So they were a bit startled by the environment, the wows and oh that were mentioned before were also heard in our case, but they also were a bit reserved on how to interact. So support there led to immersion. People soon started grabbing things. It was one of the functionalities that intuitively we built, and it was deemed one of the most important things to have there. Just grab parts of the brain, parts of the liver. We did one neuroanatomy and one surgical anatomy set of resources. People felt that they really were able to touch the anatomy, not the real anatomical instruments, the knowledge. As well as structure and cohesion was a very important factor. Now, for perceived usefulness, you're on familiar waters here. Live. Tacit education through visualization is what it's all about. It's why we're doing VR and 3D printing. And collaborative learning appeared to be the way to go. The most sought after feature and the thing that they thought they couldn't easily do without was the way that they could be one by another. There were many notes that please hold this so that I can see some structures in the brain. These are parts of collaborative educational experience, collaborative learning. Also, as I mentioned before, bespoke UX, user experience elements, were mentioned. Simple things. I must stress in this because we didn't expect to be stressed that much. Simple things like being able to manipulate 3D models in an exploratory anatomy installation went a long way to make an impression and actual facilitate education. So, suggestions, preform feedback that they gave us. Both doctors and some preclinical students also said that anatomy resources like these, exploratory anatomy resources like these, should focus on preclinical transitional training. If you're not familiar, preclinical and transitional training in medicine is the first 3 years and the space between third and fourth year in 6 years program. The need for more content was, of course, mentioned. More diverse and interactive cases. We tested the resource in surgical residents, and they said, where is my scalpel? I want to cut this liver open. So these were our cues for more diverse content. So to conclude, bespoke, it was our experience, our findings that bespoke features relevant to the educational experience trump extremely high-end visual fidelity. I could trouble you with the video, but I reserve this if you need, I can bring it up. It's not the most bells and whistle anatomy exploratory space, but it is accurate anatomically. Most interesting part for some users was the ability to manipulate, point to their colleagues, discuss details in a 3D model resource. Visualizing texture and color, even abstracted, even through hands drawing that our anatomists did, was more important than graphic impressiveness. I avoided using graphic fidelity because anatomy requires graphic fidelity, but we don't need very shiny surfaces or very good effects. You just need to focus on the things that the students need to learn. And finally, the need for educational content to provide bespoke educational UX element. Now, regarding the scope of use, collaborative learning in a joint multi-user environment was suggested. Specific use case scenario, I mean, general large categories of ways to use VR, interactivity modes. Is this an adventure-like game? Is this an exploratory space like an installation? Is it a pure game? Animation types, etc., were touched upon. And there were some wider methodological points to consider. I wrote this because I didn't want to mess it up by heart. It took only an hour with VR Resort for users to be able to suggest meaningful design feedback, not our design team. The people who we piloted the resources with started offering us a really meaningful suggestions in the sense, I'm wearing this now, and it's really good to have this and that and that. I know that I must finish if you give me 1 minute, please. Users discovered new needs for such resources. And so, concluding, the road ahead. There are 2 ways for curricular integration of such resources. One is the novelty approach, which has huge overhead, or a meaningful rate of immersive content production. For that, we need co-creative tools and methodologies for manageable overhead. For that, we need streamlined immersive content creation and pedagogical focus, a live dialogue of the participants, a very rapid iteration schedule, authoring tools, and standardized procedures. I'd like to thank you and apologize for the lightning fast bit, but as I said, I didn't want to be between you and lunch.
Okay. All right, we have probably time for maybe 1, maybe 2 questions. The mic's here, so if somebody wants to say the question, if you can't hear it, I'll just repeat it through the mic. So questions? Yes.
We were speaking about UX elements, right? Like which specific elements were they trying to measure and how did they measure that?
All right, the question was with UX elements, which specific UX elements did you try to measure and which ones were, and how were the UX elements measured?
Okay, so for user experience, at this stage, it was a qualitative free-form feedback study. As such, we did structured interviews on semi-structured interviews and think aloud session. However, the features that we tried to scope around were, first of all, the multi-user capacity. We wanted to explore if putting together a collaborative environment is really that important. Second, the modes of interaction. I mentioned a lot this grabbing, but we also wanted to see if people wanted to be able to trigger visualization, paradigm building visualizations. I mean, when you're doing neuroanatomy, I'll go to what was mentioned before, you can definitely put together some animations of how stimulus from one extremity goes all the way to a center on the brain. You can utilize this as user experience in the wider sense, not as UI element. So we tried to explore this by putting them there and then getting free-form feedback. We did not do a bespoke UX statistical analysis. We did a learning efficacy analysis and a perceived usefulness analysis, but these are still under review in order to be prepared for publication. I don't know if I covered the question.
Yeah, you did. Thanks. All right, we have time for 1 more question. Yeah.
Not so much a question, but a comment. So first, Jamie and I are happy to go to Greece.
We'd be happy to have you.
Okay, just to share, what we've sort of learned in terms of best practices with VR anatomy. Interesting that you mentioned the user experience because anecdotally, some of the comments we received from students who are doing VR anatomy is that similar. They can pick up an organ and look at it closely, and in VR, the organ is sustained in midair, so it doesn't fall and shatter like your beaker. So you can walk around it and look at it. And we've had students say that they had difficulty with the concept of axes of the body until they had a spatial experience, a 3D experience, and were able to walk around and get that experience. So I share the student response enthusiasm about the UX experience. And thank you, by the way.
All right, let's get that going. So a round of applause. We're at time. Thank you very much.
Thank you.